Alrighty, welcome to the educational content. I can't do it. How do people do that? 1 second, I'm going to put a shirt on. Alright, that's better. So, welcome to the educational content. As you can see, I've got a whiteboard. I was going to do it all fancy on the lappy, sit behind the lappy, have a look at that. But I love a whiteboard, so let's roll with it. B-Tech, man, B-Tech. First educational content, controlling the post-diet phase. Basically, not turning into a fat mess after a fat loss phase or a contest prep. Now, first things first, you will just get better at this over time. Every time you do a fat loss phase, coming out the back of it, you're going to get better at it. Every time you do a contest prep, you're going to get better at it. Me personally, my first ever contest prep was not horrendous, but a bit of a shit show at times. Second contest prep, a little bit better. After this contest prep has been much better. And the last 2 contest preps, I've used this framework, and this is a framework that I preach to all of my clients as well when they do their fat loss phases to maintain and sustain their results. So let's run through it. Number 1, don't eat like an arsehole. Sounds pretty simple, but when you're coming out the back of a fat loss phase, especially depending on how lean you get, your hunger hormones are going to be all over the shop. And depending on how hard you've pushed during that deficit phase as well, you will find that the harder you have had to push, the leaner you've had to get, or potentially the more cardio you've had to do, or the lower calories you've had to do, the cravings, which don't even make sense at times, will be a lot more prominent the harder you've had to push. And this will be a lot harder to control because you think, fuck, I just need to eat everything. You've been saving up your little list of things that you're going to eat after the fat loss phase and all this sort of stuff. And it can become a slippery slope. So just understand, and this is what I preach to all of my clients, is you don't have to eat everything at once, okay? You can have a little bit here, a little bit there, but everything that you craved, you don't have to eat at one time. Otherwise, it will escalate and escalate and escalate and just get further. So tip number 1, don't eat like an arsehole. Food will always be there. Try to remain in control and have little bits at a time. Second, keep output in place. Don't be a lazy fuck. If you have come off the back of a fat loss phase, and once again, you've had to do, a fair amount of steps to get to your goal in, relation with your calorie deficit, etc. If your cardio has had to go quite high, then you can't just cut that all out at once, okay? If you're coming off the back of a contest prep, typically in that last week, if you are ready and if you are stage lean, that last week, maybe a week and a half, you would have tapered cardio down and maybe dropped it out completely, which is great. If you're just doing a regular fat loss phase and you're a Gen Pop client, then you might not have tapered cardio too much and you might have run it all the way to the end of the fat loss phase, okay? By all means, if you're a Gen Pop client and you're just doing a fat loss phase, a tidy up, whatever, take a few days off of cardio, right? Take a few days off, obviously enjoy some good food, etc. Give the legs a little bit of a break. But you cannot go from doing, let's say, 40-minute sessions of cardio 6 times a week and 12,000 steps to absolutely nothing with your calories also coming up, with you potentially binging a little bit as well, and expect not to gain body fat really, really quickly. So yes, take a few days off to rest the legs. And if you're coming off the back of a contest prep, again, you would take a few extra days off as well. And then from there, you would reintroduce it, but obviously bring it down. So let's say you're doing 6 times, 35-minute sessions, you'll bring that down to maybe 6 times 25-minute sessions. And maybe you're doing 12,000 steps and you reduce that to 10,000 steps. And then you would keep that in for a while and then slowly taper that down over time as you continue to progress into the recovery phase and further along, okay? And then eventually you probably get down to a baseline of say 3 by 20-minute sessions, which I think most people should keep in year round. So the second point of call is you need to keep this in place. Otherwise, that energy balance will be skewed very, very high into a surplus and will result in a lot of fat gain. Third, increase protein intake. So this is a strategy that I have used a lot personally, right? We know that, well, if you don't know, protein is the most satiating macronutrient, okay? So this keeps you fuller for longer. The other benefit of protein as well is that it is harder to convert to fat stores if consumed in excess in comparison to carbohydrates and fats as well. As well as that, protein has the highest thermic effect of food. So we burn calories through the digestion of the food that we eat, and protein has the highest thermic effect. How significant it is, not of great significance, I suppose. However, it's still a great strategy when you're coming out of the back of a fat loss phase. Obviously, you want to get carbohydrates back up as well, because that's going to give you your energy and your training output and all that sort of stuff as well. But if you're finding you're really, really struggling with managing your hunger, then you are better to just go higher with the protein. I think my second contest prep, I went up to about 280 grams of protein. And for someone my size, that is probably way overkill. However, it stopped me from putting on extravagant amounts of weight because I was able to control my appetite through that. So increase your protein intake if you're really, really struggling with hunger, as opposed to eating a shit ton more fats or a shit ton more carbohydrates. That is in your plan. 4, keep high volume foods in place. You've been in a calorie deficit. For most people, throughout this deficit phase, you have introduced a lot of high volume foods to, again, manage hunger within that fat loss phase, right? So if you have been doing, heaps of potatoes, heaps of oats, heaps of fruits and veg, and then you go into your maintenance phase, recovery phase, surplus phase, whatever you want to call it, and then just because your calories have gone higher, you start to lower that food volume down, and you start to eat, heaps of snacks or heaps of low volume foods, you're going to run into more issues. So during that recovery phase, especially until you start to get hunger back in check, cravings back in check, I advise to keep high volume foods in place across most of your meals, okay? Which leads me to the next point, which I'll touch upon soon. But, don't go from eating heaps of potatoes, heaps of spudlight potatoes, things like that, to going straight into eating rice or pasta, which is going to be even more low food volume and really calorie dense. So keep those in place, keep your spudlights in, keep your pumpkin in, all of these sorts of things that are going to fill up that stomach and keep you full, because again, after the fat loss phase, it's so much harder to manage. So keeping high volume foods in place is a must, in my opinion. 5, take the piss with fruits and vegetables. Better to be bloated than fat. Literally, when you come out of the back of a fat loss phase, it is so hard to curb hunger cravings, okay? And literally, one of the strategies that I have used on occasion with myself and on clients is literally like, instead of going and fucking eating all the pastries or eating the muffins or eating all the bullshit that's really, really calorie dense for low food volumes, I'm like, just eat 600 grams of fruit. Just eat 600 grams of veg. And of course, like I said here, this may lead to a little bit of bloating and it might lead to a bit of digestive issues. However, if it stops you from going and eating 5,000 calories and you're only in a small surplus because of the excess fruit and veg that you ate, even maybe not even that bad, this is going to be a better option for maintaining body fat levels and not letting things escalate too quickly. So literally, if you have to eat a kilo of lettuce, eat a kilo of lettuce. Like, is it great for you? Probably not, but it's probably better than putting on a shit ton of body fat first. And I'll tell you what, strawberries, mixed berries in general, but strawberries, 500 grams of strawberries, mate, eat that. And that will come out to, I think 100 grams of strawberries is like 26 calories. So far out 500, let's just say 150 calories. Like, that is gonna be a much better option than eating other stuff. So take the piss with your fruits and vegetables. 6, keep water intake high. I don't know why I said it like that. Keep water intake high, okay? Throughout that diet phase, this is another strategy that you would have been using to curb hunger and obviously replenish any lost water, hydration you've got from all the cardio done, etc. One thing that people really get wrong is they go from maybe drinking like 6-7 litres of water to, oh, now I'm drinking 2 or 3 litres of water. This will help with hunger a lot. So just because you're out of the back of the deficit phase, don't forget that this was such a great tool in your fat loss phase. So continue to use that. Continue to use that in between meals to curb your hunger cravings, okay? Fill that stomach up with water. And being hydrated is great. It's the best thing ever for everything. 7, meals over snacks, okay? This is another thing that people get wrong, and it's another thing that I really stress to my clients, like especially female clients. They absolutely love snacky foods. But when you are trying to mitigate hunger as much as possible, again, you want to opt for full-size meals, you want to opt for high-volume meals, and generally snacks are going to be very, very low volume and potentially pretty calorie dense. And snacky foods are just so hard to, keep putting away, right? So always, always, always coming out the back of a fat loss phase. And I reckon if you have fitness goals in general, meals over snacks. You're better to have 4 meals instead of like 2 meals and 2 snacks per day. This will really help a lot. Meal timings for 8. So another strategy you can definitely utilize if you have the potential to do it is just prolonging that first meal. So fasting a little bit in the morning definitely helps, because then obviously you can backload your calories, which is something you would have heard about a lot. If you could have, constraints around the time that you eat, it will really help with your hunger as well. And what people typically notice is you start to get a lot hungrier after you have eaten, right? Because it starts kickstarts the metabolism, gets things going. So, have a couple of coffees in the morning, have a heaps of water in the morning, and then start your eating a little bit later. And then also typically people will find that they are hungrier at different points of the day as well. For most, they get to the end of the day and that's when the shit hits the fan, right? That's when they start to snack and all that sort of stuff. So if you could have maybe smaller meals during the day and then backload your higher calorie meals towards the back end of the day, this will be super advantageous as well. And reality is, in terms of training performance, in terms of is it optimal for muscle growth to do that? 100% no, but in the back of a fat loss phase, in the back of a contest prep, you're basically just recovering from the diet phase, right? You're not going to be able to just start building a shit ton of muscle at the start anyway. So maybe not prioritizing the training window in this little phase, maybe say that first 8 weeks, is not going to be the end of the world if it stops you from overeating. And the last tip here is to set goals ASAP and put timelines in place. The worst thing you can do is go from having this big goal to having nothing there, to prevent you from making that decision to go and overeat by too much, okay? So you should have these goals set before you finish the fat loss phase. Okay, what am I gonna do after the fat loss phase? We're gonna do 4 to 5 weeks of maintenance. I'm gonna recover. I'm gonna get a little bit of body fat on. I'm gonna have some meals out with my family and friends in a controlled manner. But then you wanna be like, okay, what is the next phase? What are we working towards now, okay? Because if you don't have something to work towards, this is where things will really run rampant if you let it, okay? So my advice is always set goals before you finish the fat loss phase, set timelines, and then set your parameters around how you're gonna navigate that first bit of time and then start working towards those goals. So there's my 9 key points in terms of controlling your shit when you're coming out of the back of a fat loss phase or a post-diet phase. Understanding, once again, reality is, if you've never done a fat loss phase to any extremity, you're probably going to have a couple of binging episodes. You're probably going to overeat, etc. As I said, I'm coming out the back of my contest prep and I have had a few occasions where I've overeaten. Fortunately for me, I use these strategies. I overate protein, I overate rice cakes and some fruits and vegetables, whereas someone else might overeat some of that really high calorie dense stuff, okay? So understand that it's probably gonna happen, but if you can utilize these strategies as best as you can and understand that food will always be there, you're probably gonna have a better time navigating your post-fat loss phase. Let's hope my head was in that the whole time, because who knows? But first educational content, whiteboard, yeah.